Hello, travelers! Today we're going to be doing a little bit of a dive into the world of honey. Specifically, we're going to be looking at what goes into the making of honey and how this can affect the color, the texture, and even the taste of honey. Because honey just isn't honey. There are all different kinds of honey that are out there. Honey is by and large produced by the European honeybee, Apis mellifera. It is produced by a series of chemical reactions undertaken by worker bees, converting the nectar that they collect from flowers. Nectar is composed of sucrose. The bees store this nectar in a specialized stomach and repeatedly regurgitate it. The bee's saliva contains an enzyme that breaks down this complex sugar into simple sugars, glucose and fructose. This is then deposited in the honeycomb of the hive, where it is fanned by the bee's wings, causing evaporation that thickens the honey and prevents fermentation. Many honeys sold today are known as mixed flower honeys or multifloral honeys. These are most of the honeys that you're going to see on grocery store shelves. Bees that have made this honey have collected nectar from a wide variety of plants. You may recognize the label of wildflower honey. That's what this is. However, some apiarists will keep hives in close proximity to specific crops and nurseries. It is from these more specified stocks when the origin of the nectar can be more accurately accounted, and we get what are known as monofloral honeys. These honeys are going to have subtle differences because of this specific pollen used in them, and this is going to affect the color, the flavor, and the viscosity of the honey itself. Here, I have an array of different honeys that I have in my collection, and you can see some of the differences right off the bat. The colors go from the very light, almost clear of the acacia, down to more yellow colors like the wild foam, ambers of the blueberry, down to very dark colors like we see in the avocado and buckwheat honey. These colors are due to the different components within the honey itself. For example, many dark honeys owe this deeper coloration to a high concentration of polyphenols, which is a type of antioxidant. And just as the color differs, so does the texture. Some honeys are going to be a lot more fluid. The acacia runs very smoothly, whereas things like the blueberry honey are going to pour more viscous, similar to what you would expect from honey. There are some monofloral honeys that are prone to crystallize at room temperature, whereas others are far more resistant to this. The reason is down to the proportions of glucose and fructose in the nectar that the bees gather to make this honey. Honey itself is a supersaturated solution of glucose and fructose. Glucose is much more prone to separate out of this solution. And with monofloral honeys that usually have not gone under pasteurization or ultrafine filtration like most grocery store honeys, there's going to be tiny little bits of things inside that honey, microscopic pieces. Here we can see a microscopic image of the honey, and you can see little pollen grains and tiny pieces of a waxy substance from the hive known as propolis. Glucose is going to bind to these tiny things, and this is going to start a process known as crystal seed formation. Glucose is just going to gradually build on top more and more onto these things until it forms a sort of crystalline network. And as you can see over here from the carrot honey, it's basically become solid inside the bottle. Now this doesn't mean that the honey has gone bad, it's just crystallized, and it's a very easy fix. All you really need to do is you need to get a container with enough water to cover the bottle itself and warm it up to about 130-140 degrees. Just leave the bottle in there, and about 10 or 15 minutes it should turn back into a pourable substance that you can use. Flavor is another component that can vary wildly between different varieties of honey. For example, the blueberry honey is going to have a very light and bright herbal flavor. Carrot honey is going to take on a bit more of an earthy taste. Wild foam is one of the most interesting out there. It has a very sweet, marshmallowy taste to it. These different flavors can play out and affect the final product of whatever you're using them to bake or cook with. Today we're going to use a dish to exemplify exactly how honey can take not just the star role in a dish, but different types of honey will affect how that dish turns out. Today we're going to be making a salted honey pie. To start, we're going to want to get our pie dough made. For that, let's get our ingredients together. We're going to need 1 1/4 cups of all-purpose unbleached flour, which is going to be about 150 grams. We're going to need a half a teaspoon of kosher salt, 1/2 teaspoon of sugar, a half cup of butter. What I like to do is I like to freeze the butter stick partially and then put it under a box grater. That way we get these nice thin shreds that are going to meld very easily into our dough and very quickly. With that, we're also going to want liquid to help form the dough into a cohesive ball. For that, we need a half cup cold water, a half cup of ice cubes, and 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. We're going to get that water mixture set together, so combine the cold water, the ice cubes, and the cider vinegar into something that's very easy to pour from. I prefer to use a measuring cup. In a medium bowl, we're going to combine our flour, our sugar, and our salt. And then we are going to mix in our butter to this. You can use a pastry blender if that is your desire. I personally like to use my hands. I find that a little bit more effective, a little bit quicker, and I just personally like to get my hands on things. Once our mixture is set together and those butter pieces have come to about pea size, everything almost has sort of like a gravelly look to it, we're going to start adding our water. We're going to do this as a gradual process, just a couple of tablespoons at a time. Mix around to make sure that it's thoroughly distributed, and then add a few more tablespoons in. We're going to do this until we form a nice cohesive dough. Once our dough is set, we are going to mush it into a disc, cover it with plastic wrap, and then we're going to leave that to chill in the fridge. You should give this at least a couple of hours. I personally prefer to leave it overnight. That way it has some time for flavors to develop without the dough having any chance of losing any of its moisture. Once our dough is properly chilled, we can get our filling made. For our filling, we are going to need another half cup of butter that's been melted. We'll also need 3/4 a cup of sugar, a tablespoon of cornmeal, half a teaspoon of kosher salt, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, 3/4 a cup of honey, 3 eggs, and half a cup of heavy cream. In a bowl, we're going to stir together our melted butter, our sugar, our cornmeal, salt, and vanilla extract. We're going to mix this together thoroughly, then we're going to pour in our honey. Once our honey is stirred in, we're going to add our eggs one at a time and whisk that into the mixture as well, followed by our heavy cream. Once everything is mixed thoroughly together, we are going to strain this out through a fine mesh sieve into another bowl. This is just to make sure that our filling is as smooth as possible and we don't have any stray granulation in there. That will be unpleasant. We're going to remove our dough from the fridge, and on a floured surface, we're going to roll that out to about 1/4 inch thickness. We're going to set that in a lightly greased pie pan or a pie tin, and we're going to take a knife, cut off any of the excess around, and then with our fingers we're going to crimp the edge of that pie dough. This is going to help air to circulate around the pie to make sure that it doesn't brown or burn. We are going to pour our filling into our pie shell, and then we're going to set that in the oven at 375 degrees for about 45 to 50 minutes. We're going to check on this regularly just to make sure that the edges of that pie shell are not burning too much. When our pie is done, it should have this nice, smooth, golden brown color, and it's going to be puffed up in the center a little bit. We're going to take it out. We're going to leave that to set on a wire rack to cool for about 2 hours, and then we're going to sprinkle a little bit of flake sea salt along the top. And there you have it. This is a very interesting dish to work with because honey takes the front stage, and you can see how different types of honey really can affect the flavor. For example, if we were to use the acacia honey, it would be a little bit lighter in color, it would have lighter flavor. Avocado honey is going to be a little bit darker in color, it's going to have a bit more of a richer, earthier flavor, and my personal favorite to do with this, since I have a real sweet tooth, is the wild foam. It's going to be a pie that is a little bit airier, but also has a very distinct marshmallow flavor to it. But I leave that experimentation in your hands. I fully encourage you to have fun with this. Until next time, I hope to see you again here at the Hungry Shark Tavern.